Hi, welcome to a very special review of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, directed by Alfonso Cuarón, a film that follows Harry, Ron, and Hermione during their third year at Hogwarts. However, after a convicted murderer sets out to finish what he originally started, Harry's life is put in danger.
Sirius Black is the reason the Potters are dead.
And now he wants to finish what he started.
I want you to swear to me you won't go looking for Black.
Why would I go looking for someone who wants to kill me?
Harry Potter.
There are a handful of movies that I like to kind of unofficially call Thanksgiving movies. Movies like Star Wars, Harry Potter, the Dark Knight trilogy, Lord of the Rings. You know, pretty much big epic movies. And not all of them have to necessarily be epic in scale, but, you know, just movies that I would consider great and special, if you know what I mean. For instance, even movies like Goodfellas, Godfather, and No Country for Old Men I would throw into that list. Overall, if you're not really seeing a trend here, it's kind of essentially movies that are near and dear to me. And although the entire Harry Potter series fits the bill, I decided to do a review of what is really my favorite Harry Potter out of the entire series, and that, of course, as the title suggests, is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. But to tell you the truth, it wasn't always this way. I wasn't always the biggest fan of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. In fact, it actually took me a few years to really appreciate this movie for what it was. And although I did like Prisoner of Azkaban when it first came out, I didn't like it or didn't love it as much as the first two films. And that's primarily due to the fact that Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban was a complete shift from everything else. Unlike the first two films that had a very bright and shiny gold palette, Prisoner of Azkaban was fairly pale and gritty and overall had a much more realistic look. And at the time when I was 11 years old, when I first saw The Prisoner of Azkaban, this new look was a bit off-putting because I was so used to the original look. But like I said earlier, my opinion on this entire film has greatly evolved throughout the years, and I'm going to talk about all of that stuff. But first, before I go any further, I want to talk about Alfonso Cuarón. Just this year, Alfonso Cuarón has really become one of my favorite filmmakers with the release of Gravity, with Seeing Children of Men, and watching Y Tu Mamá También. He's an incredible filmmaker. I mean, every single film that I've seen from him has provoked some sort of awe, and if you can do that once, then you've pretty much won me over forever. Oh, and just so everyone knows, you can watch Y Tu Mamá También on YouTube for free, captions and everything. However, just know that it's not a kids movie. And when I say that it's not a kids movie, I mean it's not a kids movie. It's an incredibly graphic film. So yeah, it's got a hard R rating. But just so you know, the movie is pretty awesome. However, if you don't like any sort of nudity or any sort of sensuality or any of that stuff, then you should stay far away from it because there's a lot. Well, you might be asking yourself, well, how did he get the gig? Well, J.K. Rowling, she was a fan of Y Tu Mamá También. Warner Bros. Really liked what he did with a movie called A Little Princess. And originally, from what I understand, the part was offered to Guillermo del Toro. However, he turned it down and kind of got Alfonso Cuarón hooked on the idea of directing a Potter film. And that is essentially it. But getting to Prisoner of Azkaban itself, what sets it apart from most Harry Potter movies is the direction. Now, don't misinterpret me, what Davey Yates did was incredible. I love what he did, I love Order of the Phoenix, and I love Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2. Besides Prisoner of Azkaban, those are my other two favorites. I adore those movies. But what Alfonso Cuarón did here was pretty much a game changer for the entire series. The entire series basically took what Alfonso Cuarón did, that look, and established it throughout the entire series. I'm going to get back to cinematography in a minute, but I must say that in Harry Potter and Prisoner of Azkaban, I really feel like this was the first time that we got to see a more in-depth version of these characters in a movie form. The relationships, the bonds between Harry and other characters really do feel a lot more alive in this film than they did in the previous two films. And that's not a knock on Chris Columbus or Steve Kloves, it's just that they do feel more alive. Again, I'm not saying none of that was in Sorcerer's Stone or Chamber of Secrets, it just seems more prevalent here. But getting back to the cinematography, besides some of the long takes and the beautiful atmosphere, I love the creative nuances. I briefly talked about either in my Gravity review or my Children of Men review how much I really like the scene with the bird kind of flying around then crashing into the Whomping Willow Tree and bursting into a bunch of feathers. It's a combination of subtle stuff like that and the more complex things that really made Hogwarts and Prison of Azkaban seem more alive and more realistic than it did in the previous two films. And one thing I must touch on are the performances. I think they're all great, but one of them that bears the most mentioning is perhaps Daniel Radcliffe. I think Daniel Radcliffe is great in all the films, but I think this is one of his better performances as Harry. Part of it is because of, well, he is given more to do. He's having to show a bit more range than he did in the previous two films. And it also doesn't hurt either when you're playing off of a great performance by David Thewlis as Lupin. I would even perhaps argue that he gives the best performance in the entire film. Either him or the always great Gary Oldman as Sirius Black. I must say I really love that character. He is given more to do in the fifth one, but as here, he's still pretty damn good. And since I didn't mention them, I do want to throw in Alan Rickman as Snape and Michael Gambon, who did replace Richard Harris as Dumbledore. And I want to say something, Richard Harris, I believe, was perfect as Dumbledore, but as the years went on and more movies were made, I really did grow attached to Michael Gambon's portrayal as Dumbledore, and personally, he's my pick for Dumbledore. But one thing I have to mention before I go is the brilliant score by John Williams. Out of all the Potter films, this is my favorite. In fact, out of all the John Williams scores, I haven't heard all of them because there's just so many, but out of all the ones that I've heard, this is my favorite as well. I really adore this score. A Window to the Past is just a gorgeous sounding track. And again, although I haven't heard all of his scores, out of the ones that I've heard, this is his most adventurous because he's using a lot of Renaissance sounding instruments. And with using such instruments, it really sort of gives this score its own original flair in the mainstream. Overall, Harry Potter and the Prison of Azkaban is not only a film that's great for kids, but it's also great for adults too. I mean, it's a movie that I believe anyone could sit down and watch and enjoy. And not only that, but you could sit down and watch this film and enjoy it without even seeing the other films. It is a standalone film. And again, going back to how this film is great for adults and kids, it's sort of like a Spielberg film. You know, when he would work with kids, it kind of has that sort of vibe to it that, you know, okay, yes, these are kids, but they're not necessarily treated like kids. This is a film that doesn't talk down to its young audience. It treats them with respect. So with all that said, I'm going to give Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban an enthusiastic 5 out of 5. If you haven't seen it for whatever reason, then I highly suggest doing so because it's really great, it's a lot of fun, and if you're someone who likes good movies, then there's a good chance you'll like it. So that's it for my review. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Colyn Kirkland wishing everyone out there a happy Thanksgiving, and as always, thanks for watching.